Good day, I'm Kerry Dillinger. This is Bible Class Topics, and you've tuned in for another topical study, this time, a lost generation. We're going to be looking carefully at Numbers 13 and 14. We want to start by reading Romans 15, verse 4, and if you have time, you might want to pause the video and look at 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 12. For whatever was written in the former days was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope. No word in any language arrests the attention and quickens interest more than the word lost. A lost child causes an entire community, state, or even nation to conduct a frantic search. The Lord knew this. He told of a lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost boy to let people know heaven's attitude towards the lost. See Luke chapter 15. He himself tells us that he came particularly to seek and to save the lost. Luke 19 verse 10. One of the most tragic accounts in the Bible is that of a lost generation, an entire generation that failed to enter the promised land, as we'll note in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. After the long bondage in Egypt, God delivered Israel. He brought them through the Red Sea. He led them to Mount Sinai. He gave them the law, and he fed them with manna. God graciously attended to their needs and led them up to the edge of the promised land. To reassure them of the promised land of rest, God told Moses to send out 12 spies to inspect the country and give their report. Let's read from Numbers 13, 1 and 2. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." These spies were to see the inhabitants, see if these inhabitants of the land were strong or weak. Check out the cities, see if they were walled cities or simply cities of tents. And examine the soil of the country, see if it's fertile and how well does it produce. They completed their assignment, but 10 of them went too far in presenting conclusions that they had reached and offering recommendations for action. These 10 stepped outside of their jurisdiction. The matters they spoke of did not come under their purview. It belonged to the Lord. So, we have the majority report given by 10 of the spies and the minority report given by Joshua and Caleb. The majority report can be summed up by looking at Numbers 13, verses 27 through 33. And they told Moses, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of the Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan." But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." Then the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw in it are of a great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." As we consider their report, we must remember that God had promised them this land. Let's turn to the minority report, as it was given by Joshua and Caleb. They concurred with the majority as to what had been seen in the land. But their report did not agree with the conclusions drawn and the recommendations offered by the 10. Caleb and Joshua had seen the obstacles which had been reported, yet they urged Israel, with the help of God, to go up and possess the land. Now let's look at Numbers chapter 14, verses 6 through 9. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, "The land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." Why did these reports differ so drastically? Both sides had seen the same land, they saw the same cities, and they looked at the same obstacles that had to be overcome. But the difference, while both saw the same picture, the majority failed to see the essential element. God was on their side. The picture is always brighter if we include God, what he can and what he is willing to do. Paul wrote this to the Philippian church in chapter 4, verse 13 of his letter. "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." And the Hebrew writer said this in chapter 13, verse 6, so we can confidently say, "The Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me?" Why was this generation lost? Well, first of all, they drew back. When they refused to go up to possess the land, God withdrew his promise. He declared they would not enter in until all those who had murmured had died in the wilderness. They would wander in the wilderness for a year for each day they had spied out the land. And if you remember, they spied out the land for 40 days. Numbers 14, verses 26 through 35, "And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, How long shall this wicked congregation grumble against me? I have heard the grumblings of the people of Israel, which they grumble against me. Say to them, As I live, declares the Lord, what you have said in my hearing I will do to you. Your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and of all your number listed in the census from 20 years old and upward, who have grumbled against me, not one shall come into the land where I swore that I would make you dwell, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. But your little ones, who you said would become a prey, I will bring in, and they shall know the land that you have rejected. But as for you, your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and shall suffer for your faithlessness. Shall suffer for your faithlessness until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness. According to the number of days which you spied out the land, 40 days, a year for each day, you shall bear your iniquity 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely this will I do to all this wicked congregation who are gathered together against me in this wilderness. They shall come to a full end, and there they shall die. What will happen to us today if we take our Christian lives and determine to draw back from God? The same thing will happen to us. We'll be wandering the rest of our lives in a wilderness, no longer under God's protection. The Hebrew writer said this in chapter 10, verses 35 through 39, "Therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, if he draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. The generation was lost because they drew back. They were lost because they were satisfied with what they heard from the majority report. They rejected the minority report without consideration or investigation. Well, the majority is not always right. Later on, or previously I should say, in Exodus 23:2, we read, "You shall not fall in with the many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit siding with the many so as to pervert justice." The children of Israel had been warned that the majority is not always going to be right. I heard a preacher say one time, God plus one always makes the majority. They rejected the minority report. They became angry with Joshua and Caleb. Numbers 14:10, then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. But the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of the meeting to all the people of Israel. They were going to stone Joshua and Caleb to death. Isn't it interesting that Joshua and Caleb were the only two that were allowed of their generation to enter into the promised land? It's dangerous to blindly follow the crowd, for often the minority is right. Noah was a small minority. Elijah stood alone against 450 false prophets of Baal. Meanwhile, who got more votes than Jesus? Barabbas. They magnified their difficulties. Another reason this generation was lost. They saw only trials and hardships while closing their eyes to blessings and opportunities. They saw giants and walled cities, but forgot God and forgot God's providence. In the New Testament, we see the Apostle Paul forgetting his thorn in the flesh because of the assurance from the Lord in 2 Corinthians 12:7-9. So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelation, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. With every difficulty, God will make provision for his own. In Romans 8:31, Paul said, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is with us, who can be against us?" See also Philippians 4:13 and Hebrews 13:6. Why was this generation lost? They did not respect themselves. What did they say? We were like grasshoppers in our own sight, much less in the sight of the giants. They should have remembered they numbered over 600,000 warriors who had never been defeated. The same God who delivered them from Egypt was still with them. Self-renunciation and humility do not mean for us or them to sell God short. We must never cast aspersions on that which God has given us. We must never belittle our own worth. John the Apostle said this in his first letter, chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. The generation was lost because they murmured and they turned back from authority. They planned an insurrection against Moses and Aaron, thus against God. Their constant whining and bickering provoked the Lord, as we saw in Numbers 14, 11, and 12. They offered nothing constructive. They loudly criticized anything offered to better their lot, and as we've already mentioned, were set out to stone Joshua and Caleb because they didn't like what they had to say. In Numbers 14, 1 through 3, we see another reason why this generation was lost. They were looking back. They were not looking ahead. They turned their attention back to Egypt. They remembered the experiences of yesterday, but did not look with anticipation toward what laid ahead. God's people in every generation must continue to look to the future. Jesus told his listeners in Luke 9:62, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." And in Colossians 3:1 and 2, the Apostle Paul said, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on this earth." The generation was also lost because they were not willing to pay the price. The cost was reckoned, and they considered it to be too much. They might have become too soft from accepting free manna and many of God's providential blessings that brought them out of Egypt this far. We must be willing to meet the demands of God. The lost generation was unwilling to do that. Luke 9:23, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." In Romans 12:1 and 2, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." We must be willing to meet God's demands, and we must be willing to count the cost and willing to pay the price. Luke 14:27 through 33, Jesus said, "Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet the one who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for some terms of peace. So therefore, if any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." Paul said in Romans 8:18, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us." It's pathetic that an entire generation was lost, and the children of Israel had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, waiting for the last of the naysayers to pass away. We must be willing to apply this lesson to ourselves here in 2022. In 1 Corinthians 10:11, Paul said, "Now these things happened to them speaking of the children of Israel, as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. We must not be unmindful of warnings given to us by God through His Word. Hebrews 4, 1 and 2 will conclude our study this morning. Therefore, while the promise of entering His rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to us just as to them, but the message they heard did not benefit them, because they were not united by faith with those who listened. Another sermon outline that we've borrowed from Gene Taylor over at expositorysermonoutlines.com. Thankful to him and to those that maintain that website. I do greatly appreciate your support. Thank you for coming here and studying with me. Those of you that make it all the way to the end of these videos are the true supporters of the channel, and I greatly appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. If you need to contact me privately, BibleClassTopics@gmail.com. Let's continue to pray for one another. Let's pray for peace in the world. Until we meet again, may God bless.